Our own son shoved us off the cliff to shut us up. My husband gasped. Play dead, they're still here. My name is Margaret Hayes, and I'm 72 years old. What I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about family. For 51 years, I believed my son David loved me. He was my miracle baby, born after 3 miscarriages when the doctors said it was impossible. Richard and I raised him in our little house on Maple Street with all the love 2 parents could give. David grew up to be a successful real estate agent. He married a lovely girl named Jennifer. They had 2 beautiful children. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. But 3 months ago, everything started to change. It began with small comments. David would visit and say things like, "Mom, this house is getting too big for you and Dad. What if something happens and nobody finds you?" Jennifer would nod in agreement. "You know, there are some lovely retirement communities nearby. You'd have so much less to worry about." At first, I thought they were just being caring. But then David started bringing legal papers to every visit. "It's just future planning," he would say with that smile I'd seen him use on clients. "A simple deed transfer so I can help manage your affairs when the time comes." Richard and I weren't ready for that. We'd worked 45 years to pay off our home. We'd raised our children there. We'd buried 3 dogs in the backyard and planted a rose garden that bloomed every spring. "We'll think about it," I'd tell David each time. But his visits became more frequent, more insistent. Last week, he brought a notary to Sunday dinner without telling us. "I thought we could just get this done," he said, spreading papers across my dining room table. "It's really just a formality." The notary, a thin woman with cold eyes, tapped her pen impatiently. "I have another appointment in 20 minutes. Richard looked at me across the table. 51 years of marriage teaches you to read each other's thoughts. We both felt the same thing. Something was wrong. "We need time to read through everything," Richard said firmly. "We'll call you when we're ready." David's face turned red. Jennifer put her hand on his arm, but he shook it off. "You're being unreasonable," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm trying to help you." The notary packed up her papers with obvious frustration. After they left, Richard and I sat in silence for a long time. "Did that feel right to you?" I asked. "No," Richard replied. "It felt like a trap." That night, David called. "I'm disappointed in you both," he said. His voice was different, colder. "You don't trust your own son." "David, we just want to understand what we're signing." "Fine," he said curtly. "Let's meet tomorrow at Red Canyon Overlook. Neutral ground. We'll have a calm discussion about your future." Red Canyon Overlook was our family's special place. We'd taken David there countless times when he was little. He loved to throw rocks into the canyon and listen for the echo. The next morning dawned beautiful. The sky was clear blue, and the desert air smelled like sage and rain from the night before. Richard packed our thermos with coffee. I made ham sandwiches and wrapped up some of David's favorite chocolate chip cookies. Despite everything, I still hoped we could work things out like a family. David was already waiting when we arrived. He stood at the metal railing looking down into the canyon. Something about his posture made me uneasy. "Beautiful view," he said without turning around. "It always has been," Richard replied cautiously. We spread out a blanket on the picnic table. I unwrapped the sandwiches, trying to keep things normal. But David didn't sit down. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," he said. He finally turned to face us, and I was shocked by the look in his eyes. They were cold, empty. "You've worked hard your whole lives," he continued. "You deserve to rest. To not worry about property taxes and maintenance, and all the stress of homeownership." "David, we're happy in our home," I said gently. "Are you?" he asked. "Mom, you're forgetting things. Last month you left the stove on. Dad's arthritis is getting worse. What happens when one of you falls and breaks a hip?" I felt tears starting to burn my eyes. "We'll deal with that when it happens." "No," David said firmly. "We'll deal with it now." He pulled the same papers from his jacket. "The deed transfer. I need you to sign these today. Right now." Richard stood up slowly. At 74, he still had dignity. "Son, we said we need time to think." "You've had time," David snapped. 3 months of time. "I'm tired of waiting." That's when I noticed the car pulling into the parking area behind us. A black sedan with tinted windows. David glanced at it and nodded slightly. A chill ran down my spine. "Who is that?" I asked. David didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer to us. Too close. Sign the papers, or I'll have no choice but to have you both declared incompetent. I already have documentation of Mom's forgetfulness. Dad's medical records show declining mobility. It won't be hard to convince a judge. My heart started pounding. This wasn't my son talking. This was a stranger. Richard moved protectively in front of me. David, what's gotten into you? But David wasn't looking at his father anymore. He was looking over our shoulders at the canyon behind us, at the 300-foot drop to the rocks below. And that's when I saw it in his eyes. The decision he'd already made. We were never supposed to leave Red Canyon Overlook alive. You won't sign? David asked, his voice deadly quiet. I felt Richard's hand squeeze my shoulder. A warning. We both sensed what was coming. David, please, I said, my voice trembling. We just want to understand what we're signing. You don't need to understand, he replied coldly. You need to trust me. The man from the black sedan was walking toward us now. Tall, thin, wearing a dark suit. He had the kind of face you forget immediately, which somehow made him more frightening. These your parents? The stranger asked David. Yes, David said without looking at us. They're being difficult. I grabbed Richard's arm. Something was terribly wrong. The way David talked about us, like we weren't even human beings. Like we were just obstacles in his path. Maybe they need some encouragement, the stranger said with a smile that made my blood run cold. That's when I understood. This wasn't about legal papers anymore. This was about something much worse. Run, Richard whispered in my ear. But there was nowhere to go. Behind us was a 300-foot drop into the canyon. In front of us were two men who clearly had no intention of letting us leave. David, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Whatever you're planning, please don't do this. I'm your mother. I love you. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. A shadow of the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he had nightmares. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. Love doesn't pay life insurance premiums, he said flatly. My heart stopped. Life insurance. That's what this was about. 6 months ago, David had convinced us to increase our life insurance policies. Just to make sure I can take care of everything when the time comes, he'd said. We trusted him completely. Now I realized we'd signed our own death warrants. The policies don't pay if it's suicide, the stranger said matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. But accidents pay double. I felt the world start to spin. This couldn't be happening. Not my son. Not the baby I'd nursed through pneumonia. Not the child I'd helped with homework every night for 12 years. David, please, Richard said, stepping forward. If you need money, we can work something out. But this isn't the way. It's too late for that, Dad, David replied. I'm already in too deep. Too deep with what? I demanded. David's face twisted with anger and desperation. You think your perfect son is actually perfect? I owe people money. Dangerous people. People who don't accept payment plans. The stranger nodded. Your son made some bad investments. Lost a lot of other people's money. Now he owes us $300,000. $300,000. I couldn't even imagine such a sum. The insurance policies will cover it, David said to the stranger. Both of them together pay $600,000. More than enough. I stared at my son in horror. He'd calculated our worth down to the penny. David, we can mortgage the house, I said desperately. We can sell everything we own. That might cover $50,000, he said dismissively. It's not enough. The stranger was getting impatient. We need to move. Too many hikers use this trail. David nodded. Then he looked at us with eyes I didn't recognize. I'm sorry it has to be this way. He moved so fast I didn't have time to scream. Two powerful hands slammed into my chest. The world turned upside down. Sky, ground, rocks, nothing made sense. I felt myself falling through space, the wind rushing past my ears like a freight train. I hit something hard and thorny. Branches tore at my clothes and skin. My left wrist made a sickening crack as it bent at an impossible angle. Pain shot through my entire body. A second later, Richard crashed down beside me. His head struck a rock with a sound I'll never forget. Blood immediately began flowing from a gash above his eyebrow. We were on a narrow ledge about 30 feet down from the rim. Below us, the canyon dropped another 270 feet to the rocky bottom. My wrist was definitely broken. Every breath sent knives through my ribs. Richard was unconscious, blood pooling under his head. Above us, I could hear voices. "You sure they're dead?" the stranger asked. "Look at them," David replied. "No one survives a fall like that." I wanted to call out to let them know we were alive. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the cold way David had pushed us. Maybe it was the stranger's casual discussion of murder. Richard stirred beside me. His eyes fluttered open. I could see he was badly hurt, but he was alive. I pressed my finger to my lips. He understood immediately. "Should we go down and check?" the stranger asked. "No," David said quickly. "Someone might see us." The fall was enough. No one could survive it. Richard rolled closer to me, every movement obviously causing him pain. "Play dead." He whispered so quietly I could barely hear him. "They're still here." Above us, a camera clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. "Insurance will want photos of the accident scene," David explained. I closed my eyes and tried not to breathe. My broken wrist throbbed with every heartbeat. Blood from Richard's head wound dripped onto my arm. "Perfect," the stranger said with satisfaction. "Grieving son finds parents after tragic hiking accident. Very believable." "When should I call 911? David asked. "Give it an hour. You were searching for them when you found the bodies. You're too distraught to think clearly." Very natural reaction. Their footsteps moved away from the edge. Car doors slammed. An engine started. But I knew better than to move. Not yet. Richard's breathing was shallow but steady. We lay there in the thorny brush, bleeding and broken, waiting for silence. Finally, after what felt like forever, Richard whispered, "Are they gone?" I listened carefully. Nothing but wind and the distant cry of a hawk. "I think so," I whispered back. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. My broken wrist sent lightning bolts of agony up my arm. But we were alive. "Can you move?" I asked Richard. "I think so," he said weakly. "Head hurts like hell, but I can move." I looked around our tiny ledge. We were trapped. The cliff face above us was too steep to climb. Below us was certain death. My phone was somehow still in my pocket. I pulled it out with my good hand. No signal. And only 2% battery left. "We're in trouble," I told Richard. "But we're alive," he replied. "David thinks we're dead. That gives us an advantage." Above us, gravel scattered down the cliff face. Someone was coming back. Richard grabbed my hand. "Don't move. Don't breathe." Footsteps approached the rim directly above us. I could hear someone breathing heavily. "Just making sure," David's voice called down. He was checking on our bodies, making sure his plan had worked. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Richard did the same beside me. After an eternity, the footsteps retreated again. But what David didn't know was that his phone call to report our accident would be the evidence that destroyed him. Richard and I lay side by side, barely breathing, sprawled across that narrow, thorny ledge as the sun carved long golden fingers down the canyon walls. My wrist throbbed and every pulse sent a pinprick of lightning into my shoulder, but I didn't dare whimper. For a few minutes after David's footsteps faded, we simply stared at each other. Pale, bleeding, battered, united by terror and disbelief. I swallowed, grateful for the pain. It meant I was alive. Above us, a hawk called out, its shadow gliding over the rim. Richard tried to shift. I pressed his shoulder. "Don't," I whispered. "If he hears anything." But Richard shook his head and gritted his teeth. "We need to stop the bleeding." He tore a piece from his shirt and pressed it to his forehead, streaking blood across his temple like war paint. His eyes blazed with something I hadn't seen in years. Old soldier stubbornness, the will not to die on someone else's terms. Fear churned in me, but another feeling rose too. Anger, hot and personal. The boy I loved had been replaced by a stranger with empty eyes. But why now? Why so ruthlessly? I replayed the blackmail, the insurance policies, David's hard voice. Our son had debts. Huge, ugly debts with men who made mercy a myth. My heart twisted at the memory of every bedtime story, every scraped knee I'd kissed, every sacrifice I'd made for him. I realized too late. Family means nothing to some people, especially when there's money on the line. The papers, the notary, the pressure. It had all been part of his months-long plan to get rid of us and collect the insurance. I pictured him rehearsing that grieving son act for police and neighbors. I shuddered. But we were not dead. And as long as we breathed, we had a chance. A muffled ringtone startled us. Somewhere above, David's phone rang. His voice carried just barely. Yeah, it's done. No, there were no witnesses. The ledge blocks them from the trail. A pause then. I'll call you after I've made the 911 call. An hour, like you said. That was his accomplice. The man in the dark suit. They'd planned it all. Rehearsed even the call to authorities. My phone in my jeans pocket still had 1% battery. I painfully pulled it free with my good hand, but there was no signal. I typed a text to Jennifer. We are alive. David tried to kill us. Red Canyon Overlook. Help. And press send, praying the phone would catch a bar of service if we crawled higher. We were stuck with two options: climb and risk breaking our necks, or wait for a rescue that might never come. Richard's breath grew raspy and shallow, his face slick with sweat. Don't leave me, he whispered, and I squeezed his fingers as tightly as I could manage. Time blurred in pain and fear. Above, voices again. David and the stranger returned. Take more photos. Get branches, rocks. Make it believable. I heard them rustling, pacing, snapping stage shots for insurance. Then the crunch of gravel. Anxiety spiking in my chest as they grew close to the edge again. One stone bounced down, shattering near my leg. I jerked, freezing instantly, silent tears cutting trails through the dust on my cheek. Careful, the stranger said. If someone sees us, this will all unravel. David muttered a curse. We need to move the car, the man said. Too long in one spot looks suspicious. More silence. I counted Richard's breaths, slow and shallow, matching each one with my own. In that moment, death wasn't the thing I feared. It was being found by my son, who would throw our battered bodies to the bottom for good if he thought the job unfinished. Margaret, Richard croaked. If we make it out, you know what to do. Inudda. Idegata pruof. David could lie as much as he wanted, but we would have the truth. As the sun disappeared, cold crept in. Shadows thickened. The only thing louder than the wind was our heartbeat. And the one hope I clung to: we were survivors, not victims. Not yet. Somewhere above, a car finally drove off, its engine echoing between the canyon walls. We still didn't dare move. Not until the sky was ink black and coyotes started their song. Only then did I dare whisper. They really left. Richard nodded, wet with sweat. Both of us still clinging to life, determination, and a small battered phone with our only chance for justice. But in the darkness, footsteps crunched once more near the rim. A final chilling reminder that David's plan might not be over, and that the worst betrayal was yet to come. The footsteps above us belonged to a third person. Someone David hadn't told us about. Where are they? A woman's voice called down. My blood turned to ice. I recognized that voice. It was Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, David's wife. The woman I'd welcomed into our family 15 years ago. The woman I'd taught to make my grandmother's apple pie recipe. Down there, David replied coldly. Both of them. Exactly like we planned. Jennifer. Sweet Jennifer, who sent me birthday cards and brought the grandchildren over every Sunday. Jennifer, who'd sit at my kitchen table drinking tea and complaining about her mother-in-law problems with her own mother. Jennifer, who'd hugged me just last week and said, I'm so lucky to have you as my second mom. It had all been an act. Every hug, every smile, every family dinner where she'd helped me set the table and laughed at Richard's old jokes. She'd been planning our murder the entire time. Are you sure they're dead? Jennifer asked, her voice sharp with anxiety. Look at the blood on the rocks, David said matter-of-factly. No one survives a fall like that. Richard's hand found mine in the darkness. His grip was weaker now, but his fingers still wrapped around mine with fierce determination. We lay perfectly still, barely breathing, as our own family members discussed our corpses like items on a grocery list. The insurance money will clear all our debts, Jennifer said with obvious relief. Plus we'll have enough left over to buy that house in Scottsdale we looked at. Scottsdale. They'd been house shopping with our death money. While I was baking cookies for their children, they were calculating how much our lives were worth and planning their new future without us. What about the kids? David asked. When do we tell them their grandparents are dead? After the funeral, Jennifer replied coldly. They'll be sad for a while, but kids forget. We'll take them to Disneyland after we get the insurance check. That'll cheer them up. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. My grandchildren. 8-year-old Emma, who loved it when I braided her hair. 6-year-old Tyler, who always asked me to read him just one more story at bedtime. They were going to be told their grandparents died in a hiking accident. They would cry and grieve and blame themselves for not saying goodbye properly. And David and Jennifer would comfort them. They would play the role of devastated parents dealing with their own grief while secretly planning their vacation to celebrate our deaths. We should go, David said. I need to drive to the ranger station and report them missing. The story is that they said they were going hiking but never came home. What if someone saw us here? Jennifer worried. No one saw us, David assured her. I checked the trail registry. We're the only ones who signed in today. Trail registry. Of course. David had thought of everything. He'd made sure there were no witnesses to his parents' murder. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. The screen lit up for just a second, casting a tiny glow in the darkness. Richard saw it too. His eyes widened with alarm. If David or Jennifer noticed the light. But they were already walking away, their voices fading as they headed back to their car. Remember, David called back to Jennifer. When the police question us, we're devastated. We've been searching everywhere for them. We're worried sick. I know how to act, Jennifer snapped back. I've been practicing. Practicing. She'd been practicing how to cry over our dead bodies. How to play the grieving daughter-in-law at our funeral. How to comfort our grandchildren while they mourned the grandparents she'd helped murder. A car engine started in the distance. Door slammed. Then silence. I pulled out my phone with my good hand. Still no signal, but I had 1% battery left. I scrolled through my contacts until I found my sister Patricia's number in Phoenix. Patricia. My older sister who'd always been the strong one. Who'd raised 4 kids as a single mother after her husband died in Vietnam. Who'd never trusted David completely, though she'd never said why. I typed a message with my thumb. David tried to kill us. Red Canyon Overlook. We're alive but hurt. Send help. Don't trust anyone else. The message failed to send. No signal. Richard was looking worse. His face was pale in the moonlight, and his breathing was getting more labored. The head wound had stopped bleeding, but I was worried about a concussion. We needed medical help soon, but we also needed to stay hidden. If David came back and found us alive, he wouldn't make the same mistake twice. He'd finish the job properly this time. We have to move, I whispered to Richard. Can you stand? He nodded weakly and tried to push himself up with his arms. I helped him as much as I could with my one good arm. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through my broken wrist, but fear gave me strength. We were on a ledge about 6 feet wide and maybe 10 feet long. Behind us, the cliff face rose straight up 30 feet to the rim. In front of us was a 300-foot drop to certain death. But to our left, I could see what looked like a narrow path leading around the canyon wall. It was barely wide enough for one person, covered with loose rocks and thorny bushes. One wrong step would send us tumbling to the bottom, but it was our only chance. That way, I pointed. Maybe it leads to another trail. Richard squinted in the moonlight. It's suicide, Margaret. We'll never make it in the dark. We'll die here if we stay, I replied. David will come back. He's too smart to leave loose ends. Richard nodded grimly. He knew I was right. We started moving slowly along the ledge toward the narrow path. Every step was agony. My broken wrist throbbed with each movement. Richard stumbled twice and I had to catch him with my good arm. But we kept going, step by painful step, because the alternative was death. Behind us, gravel scattered down the cliff face. Someone was coming back to the rim. A flashlight beam swept across the rocks where we'd been lying just minutes before. Damn it! David's voice carried clearly in the night air. Where are they? We flattened ourselves against the canyon wall, hidden in shadow. The flashlight beam passed just inches from my head. They must have crawled away to die, Jennifer said with disgust. Like wounded animals. That's exactly what we were. Wounded animals. But we were still breathing. Still fighting. And now we knew the truth about our son and daughter-in-law. The question was, would we live long enough to expose them? The flashlight beam swept back and forth across the ledge where we'd been lying. David and Jennifer were looking for our bodies, but we'd moved just in time. Hidden in the shadow of an overhanging rock, we pressed ourselves against the canyon wall and tried not to breathe. They can't have gone far, David said, frustration clear in his voice. They're both hurt bad. Maybe they fell all the way down, Jennifer suggested hopefully. Let's check the bottom in the morning. No, David said firmly. If their bodies are at the bottom, someone will find them before we do. Hikers, park rangers. We need to find them tonight and make sure they're really dead. My heart hammered against my ribs. They weren't giving up. They were going to keep searching until they found us. Richard's breathing was getting worse. Each breath sounded like a struggle. I was terrified he was bleeding internally from the fall. We needed medical help desperately, but we couldn't risk calling for rescue. Not when David and Jennifer were still hunting for us. "I'm going down there," David announced. Above us, a rope uncoiled and dropped down the cliff face. It hit the ledge where we'd been lying with a soft thud. "Be careful," Jennifer called down. "If you fall too, how do we explain 2 accidents?" "I'm not going to fall," David replied coldly. "I've been rock climbing since college." Of course he had. My son had always been athletic, always confident in his physical abilities. Now he was using those skills to hunt down his injured parents like wounded prey. I heard the scrape of boots against rock as David rappelled down the cliff face. The sound was getting closer. Richard squeezed my hand weakly. He was trying to tell me something, but he couldn't speak without risking discovery. I looked into his eyes and saw what he was thinking. If David found us, we were dead. But if we tried to run in our condition, we'd probably fall off the narrow path and die anyway. We were trapped between certain death and certain death. The rope creaked as David descended. I could hear him muttering to himself, probably calculating angles and distances. Always the methodical one, my son. Even when committing murder, he approached it like a business problem to be solved. A loose rock clattered down from above, bouncing off the cliff face just feet from where we hid. David was almost at our level now. "See anything?" Jennifer called down. "Blood on the rocks," David replied. "They definitely hit hard. But I don't see bodies." "They must have crawled away to die somewhere," Jennifer said impatiently. "Can we just call the rangers now and report them missing?" "Not until I'm sure they're dead," David said. "If they're still alive, they could ruin everything." I felt a surge of bitter pride. My son knew me well enough to understand that I wouldn't go quietly into that good night. If I was still breathing, I was still fighting. The rope jerked as David moved along the ledge, searching methodically. He was maybe 20 feet away from our hiding spot now. In the moonlight, I could see his silhouette against the canyon wall. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. The vibration seemed impossibly loud in the silence. I fumbled to turn it off, but Richard grabbed my wrist and shook his head. He pointed upward with his eyes. Jennifer was talking on her phone above us. "Yes, I understand," she was saying. "We'll have the money within a week of the death certificates being issued. $600,000 like we agreed." $600,000. That's what our lives were worth to them. I'd given birth to David. I'd raised him. I'd sacrificed everything for his happiness. And he'd calculated that I was worth $300,000 dead. What if the bodies are never found? Jennifer asked whoever she was talking to. There was a pause while she listened. "Okay, so 7 years if they're declared legally dead without bodies. That's too long. We need the money now." 7 years. They were prepared to wait 7 years for us to be declared dead if necessary. But they preferred us to be found immediately, so they could collect the insurance money right away. David's rope jerked again as he moved closer to our hiding spot. 15 feet now. Maybe 10. Richard was looking at me with an intensity one hadn't seen since our wedding day. He was trying to tell me something crucial, but he couldn't speak. Then I understood. He wanted me to use my phone. Not to call for help, but to record what was happening. To get evidence of David and Jennifer's confession. With my good hand, I slowly pulled out my phone and activated the video camera. The screen was dim, but it was recording. I could hear Jennifer clearly from above, still talking about insurance money and timetables for our deaths. "The accident scene looks perfect," she was saying. "David staged it really well. Elderly couple goes hiking, loses their footing, falls to their deaths. Very believable." The rope jerked violently as David moved again. He was close enough now that I could hear him breathing heavily from the exertion of rappelling. "I found something," he called up to Jennifer. My blood turned to ice. What had he found? "What is it?" Jennifer called back. "Mom's thermos," David replied. "It must have fallen with them." The thermos Richard had packed that morning when we thought we were going on a family picnic to reconcile with our son. Now it was evidence in our own murder case. "Good," Jennifer said with satisfaction. "More proof they were here." David was moving along the ledge now, following the path we'd taken. He was tracking us like a bloodhound. 8 feet away. 6 feet. 4 feet. Richard's grip on my hand tightened. This was it. David was going to find us, and when he did, he'd finish what he started. But I kept recording. Whatever happened next, there would be evidence. Someone someday would know the truth about what David and Jennifer had done. 3 feet away now. I could smell David's cologne, the same expensive brand he'd worn since college. The scent I used to love because it reminded me of my successful son. 2 feet. 1 foot. David rounded the corner of the overhanging rock and looked directly at us. For a moment, time stopped. Father and son stared at each other across a canyon of betrayal and blood. David's face went white with shock, then red with rage.
Hello, son, Richard whispered.
But what David did next shocked even me. David stared at us for what felt like an eternity. His face cycled through shock, rage, and something else I couldn't identify. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy I'd raised. The child who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. Then his expression hardened into something cold and calculating. You should have died, he said quietly. But we didn't, Richard replied, his voice stronger than it had been all night. And now we know exactly what kind of man you've become. David glanced up toward the rim where Jennifer was waiting. I could see him thinking, calculating his options. He could kill us right here with his bare hands, push us off this narrow ledge and finish what he'd started. But something stopped him. David found them. Jennifer called down. Are they dead? David hesitated. In that hesitation, I saw something I hadn't expected. Shame. Almost, he called back to Jennifer. Give me a few minutes. He turned back to us and I saw tears in his eyes.
Actual tears.
Why didn't you just sign the papers? He whispered desperately. It would have been so much easier. You could have lived in a nice retirement home. You would have been comfortable. While you stole our house? I asked. While I managed your assets, he corrected. I wouldn't have stolen anything. I just needed the equity to pay off my debts. $300,000 in debts, Richard said. What did you do, David? David's shoulders sagged. For the first time all day, he looked like my son again instead of a cold-blooded killer. I made some bad investments, he admitted. Real estate deals that went south. I borrowed money from people who don't accept excuses or payment plans. So you decided to murder your parents for insurance money? I asked. It wasn't supposed to be murder, David said desperately. It was supposed to be an accident, quick and painless. You wouldn't have suffered. We're suffering now, Richard pointed out. David looked down at our injuries. My obviously broken wrist. The blood still seeping from Richard's head wound. The cuts and bruises covering both of us. I can get you help, he said suddenly. I can call for rescue. We can say you fell while hiking and I found you. And then what? I asked. You'll try again next week? No, David said quickly. I'll find another way to handle the debts. I'll sell my house. I'll declare bankruptcy if I have to. David, what's taking so long? Jennifer called down impatiently. They're still alive, David called back. There was a long silence from above. Then Jennifer's voice, sharp with panic. Then finish them. David flinched as if he'd been slapped. I can't, he called back to her. What do you mean you can't? Jennifer demanded. They'll ruin everything. They're my parents, David said, his voice breaking. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe there was still some humanity left in my son after all. David, I said gently, it's not too late to do the right thing. He looked at me with tears streaming down his face. Yes, it is. I've already crossed lines I can never come back from. Everyone makes mistakes, Richard said. But you can still choose how this ends. Above us, I heard Jennifer talking rapidly on her phone. There's been a complication, she was saying. Yes, they're still alive. No, David won't finish them. What do you want me to do? She paused, listening. Okay, she said finally. I understand. A chill ran through me. Jennifer was talking to someone else. The man in the dark suit, probably. Or maybe someone even worse. David, Jennifer called down. My friend is coming to help us. What friend? David asked, but I could see in his eyes that he already knew. The kind of friend who doesn't have emotional attachments to your parents, Jennifer replied coldly. The man in the dark suit. He was coming back. And unlike David, he wouldn't hesitate to kill us. How long? David called up to Jennifer. 20 minutes, she replied. 20 minutes. That was all the time we had left to live unless we could get off this ledge. David, I said urgently, you have to help us get out of here. I can't, he said miserably. If I help you escape, Jennifer's friends will kill all of us. Me, you, Jennifer, even the kids. What kind of people are you involved with? Richard asked. The kind who loan money to desperate real estate agents, David replied bitterly. The kind who don't care about collateral damage. I understood now. David wasn't just a greedy son trying to steal his parents' money. He was trapped in a web of debt and threats that had spiraled beyond his control. Jennifer and her friends had pushed him into this corner, but understanding didn't excuse what he'd done. And it didn't change the fact that we had less than 20 minutes to live. There's another way, Richard said quietly. David looked at him with desperate hope. What way? Help us disappear, Richard said. Tell Jennifer we're dead. Show her some blood on the rocks. Let us crawl away and hide until we can get to the authorities. It won't work, David said, shaking his head. Her friend will want to see bodies. He'll search this whole canyon if he has to. Then we have to get out of the canyon, I said. David looked at the narrow path we'd been following around the cliff face. It disappeared into darkness, winding deeper into the maze of rock formations. That path leads to Devil's Backbone, he said. It's a mile of narrow ridges with 1,000-foot drops on both sides. In the dark with your injuries, it's suicide. As opposed to staying here and being murdered by Jennifer's friend? Richard asked. David nodded grimly. He understood our logic. I'll help you as far as I can, he said finally. But when her friend arrives, I have to come back and play my part. If he suspects I helped you escape, he'll kill my whole family. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than waiting here to die. Above us, a car door slammed in the distance. Then another. They're early, Jennifer called down with obvious relief. We were out of time. Go, David whispered urgently. Now. I'll buy you as much time as I can. But as Richard and I started crawling along the narrow path toward Devil's Backbone, I heard new voices above us. Cold voices discussing the best ways to dispose of inconvenient witnesses. And I realized that David might have doomed us all by waiting too long to choose the right side. The voices above us belonged to 3 men now. Cold, professional voices discussing logistics like we were cargo to be disposed of. Where are the bodies? One of them asked Jennifer. Down there somewhere, she replied nervously. David went to check, but they crawled away after the fall. Crawled away. The man's voice was sharp with suspicion. How badly hurt are they? Broken bones. Head injuries. They can't have gone far. Richard and I were moving as fast as we could along the narrow path, but it was treacherous in the darkness. Loose rocks shifted under our feet. Thorny bushes tore at our clothes. My broken wrist sent lightning bolts of pain up my arm with every movement. Behind us, I could hear David rappelling back up the cliff face to face Jennifer and her associates. There's a lot of blood on the ledge, David reported. But no bodies. They must have fallen further down. Or they're hiding, said a voice I didn't recognize. Cold as winter steel. From injuries like that? Jennifer protested. They're probably unconscious somewhere, bleeding out. Maybe, the cold voice said. But I don't like loose ends. We're going down to look for them. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were coming after us. Professional killers who wouldn't make the same emotional mistakes David had made. There's no need, David said quickly. I checked everywhere they could have gone. The fall was at least 30 feet onto rocks. Nobody survives that kind of trauma at their age. Your confidence is touching, the cold voice replied. But I've seen too many sure things go wrong. We look for the bodies. More ropes hit the cliff face. These men came prepared with professional equipment. Richard stumbled beside me, going down on one knee. His face was gray with pain and exhaustion. I can't keep this pace, he whispered. You have to, I replied, helping him back to his feet. They're coming. The path ahead curved around a massive rock outcropping. If we could reach it, we might be able to hide until the searchers gave up. But it was at least 100 yards away, and the path was getting narrower. Behind us, flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Multiple lights, sweeping methodically across the canyon walls. They went this way, someone called. Fresh blood on the rocks. We were leaving a trail. Richard's head wound had started bleeding again, and my wrist was dripping steadily. Faster, I urged Richard. He nodded grimly and pushed himself harder. We stumbled forward along the treacherous path, 50 yards from the rock outcropping now. I see movement ahead. A voice called behind us. A flashlight beam swept across the path just feet behind us. If we'd been a few seconds slower, it would have caught us. 40 yards to the rocks now. 30. There! Someone shouted. 2 figures on the Devil's Backbone path. The flashlight beams converged on us like spotlights. We were exposed, trapped on a narrow ledge with nowhere to run. Stop right there, the cold voice commanded. There's nowhere to go. He was right. Ahead of us, the path ended at the rock outcropping. Behind us were armed killers. Below us was a 1,000-foot drop. But Richard kept moving forward, pulling me with him. What are you doing? I whispered. Trust me, he replied. We reached the rock outcropping. The path seemed to end in solid stone, but Richard kept going, feeling along the cliff face with his hands. There, he said with satisfaction. I looked where he was pointing and saw it. A crack in the rock face barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I found this when I was exploring with David 20 years ago, Richard whispered. It leads to a cave system that connects to the main trail. The flashlight beams were getting closer. We could hear boots on rocks behind us. Can you fit through? Richard asked, eyeing my broken wrist. I nodded, though the thought of squeezing through that narrow opening made me want to scream. Richard went first, disappearing into the crack like a ghost. I followed, biting my lip to keep from crying out as the rough stone scraped against my injuries. The passage was pitch black and barely wide enough for my shoulders. I could feel Richard ahead of me, moving slowly through the darkness. Behind us, the voices got louder as the searchers reached the end of the path. Where did they go? Someone demanded. There's nowhere to go, another voice replied. The path ends here. They jumped, Jennifer suggested hopefully. Suicide rather than face what was coming. No, the cold voice said. I don't buy it. Old people don't jump off cliffs. They were here 30 seconds ago. Flashlight beams probed the rock face, searching for any sign of where we'd gone. There's a crack here, someone called. Barely visible. My blood turned to ice. They'd found our escape route. Too narrow for adults. Another voice said dismissively. Check it anyway, the cold voice commanded. A flashlight beam penetrated the crack, illuminating the passage ahead of us. Richard and I pressed ourselves against the walls, trying to become one with the stone. The beam swept past us, missing us by inches. Empty, the searcher reported. Just goes back about 10 feet and then narrows to nothing. He was wrong. The passage continued for another 50 yards before opening into a cave system. But from his angle, he couldn't see that far. They fell, Jennifer said with finality. They have to have fallen. There's nowhere else they could go. Maybe, the cold voice said reluctantly. But I want a full search at first light. Every ledge, every crevice. That could take days, David protested. Then it takes days, the cold voice replied. Your parents are a threat to a very lucrative operation. Dead or alive, we find them. The voices started moving away from the crack, back along the path toward the main trail. Richard tugged on my sleeve, indicating we should keep moving deeper into the passage. We crawled forward on our hands and knees, every inch in agony of scraped skin and jarred bones. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the passage opened into a larger space. I could feel cooler air flowing past my face. Cave, Richard whispered. We made it. I pulled out my phone and activated the flashlight. The dim glow revealed a small cavern with passages leading in 3 directions. Which way? I asked. Richard studied the cave walls, looking for landmarks he remembered from decades ago. That way, he said, pointing to the left passage. It should lead to the main trail about half a mile from the parking area. We started moving again, hope giving us strength we didn't know we still had. But behind us, echoing through the crack in the rocks, I could hear the cold voice giving orders. Post someone here all night. If they're still alive, they'll try to come back this way eventually. We weren't safe yet. And now I realized that David's debt problems were just the beginning. Jennifer and her associates were involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than insurance fraud. The question was, would we live long enough to expose them all? We crawled through the cave system for what felt like hours. My phone's flashlight was dying, casting weaker and weaker light on the rocky walls around us. Richard's breathing was labored, each step a monumental effort. Finally, we saw natural light ahead. Dawn was breaking, painting the cave entrance in soft gray and gold. Almost there, Richard whispered. We emerged from the cave onto a hiking trail I recognized. The Sunrise Trail, which connected to the main parking area. We were about half a mile from where David had tried to kill us. But we were also exposed. If Jennifer's people were searching the area, they'd find us easily on this open trail. We need to get to a phone, I said. Call for help before they realize we escaped. Richard nodded weakly. He was getting worse. The head injury, combined with hours of crawling through caves, had taken a serious toll. There was a ranger station at the trailhead. If we could reach it, we'd be safe. But it was still a quarter-mile through open terrain. Can you make it? I asked Richard. I have to, he replied. We started walking, supporting each other. Every step was agony, but we kept going. The sun was coming up behind the mountains, and birds were starting to sing. It should have been beautiful, but all I could think about was reaching safety. Halfway to the ranger station, we heard engines behind us. Multiple vehicles driving fast on the access road. They're coming, Richard said grimly. We stumbled off the trail and hid behind a cluster of boulders. 3 black SUVs raced past, heading toward the main overlook where this nightmare had started. They're doing a search pattern, I realized. Looking for our bodies. But they were looking in the wrong direction. For now, we waited until the engines faded, then continued toward the ranger station. My phone finally found a signal as we got closer to civilization. 2% battery. Enough for one call. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Margaret Hayes, I said breathlessly. My husband and I need immediate medical attention. We're at Red Canyon State Park, near the Sunrise Trail Ranger Station. What type of medical emergency, ma'am? We were pushed off a cliff by our son. Attempted murder. My husband has a serious head injury and I have a broken wrist. There was a pause on the line. Ma'am, did you say pushed off a cliff by your son? Yes. David Hayes. He's trying to kill us for life insurance money. Please send police and an ambulance immediately. Units are on the way, ma'am. Are you in immediate danger? I looked back toward the trail where the black SUVs had disappeared. Yes. There are armed men searching for us right now. Find a safe place to hide and stay on the line if you can. My phone died. Richard and I reached the ranger station as the first police car arrived, followed closely by an ambulance and a fire truck. The cavalry had arrived. Over here, I called, waving with my good arm. The paramedics reached us first, immediately beginning to assess our injuries. Richard's head wound was worse than I'd thought. He was barely conscious now. We need to get him to a trauma center immediately, one paramedic said. While they worked on Richard, I spoke to the police officers who'd responded. My son David Hayes tried to murder us last night. I told Detective Martinez, the lead investigator. He pushed us off Red Canyon Overlook for insurance money. Where is your son now? Detective Martinez asked. Probably still searching the canyon with his accomplices, I replied. Armed and dangerous men. My daughter-in-law Jennifer is involved too. Detective Martinez radioed for backup units to converge on the overlook area. Ma'am, I need you to start from the beginning, he said. Tell me everything that happened. I told him about the papers David wanted us to sign. The meeting at the overlook. Being pushed off the cliff. Overhearing their plans for the insurance money. Our escape through the cave system. Do you have any proof of these allegations? Detective Martinez asked. I smiled grimly and held up my phone. I recorded part of their conversation. Jennifer talking about insurance money and staging our accident. It's all on here. The detective's eyes widened. That phone is now evidence. We'll need to preserve that recording. Within an hour, the canyon was swarming with police officers. They found David and Jennifer at the overlook, along with 3 men who turned out to be wanted by the FBI for money laundering and racketeering. David broke down when they arrested him. He confessed everything, sobbing that he never meant for it to go so far. He just needed money to pay his debts, but Jennifer and her associates had pushed him into attempted murder. Jennifer, on the other hand, showed no remorse. She glared at me as they put her in handcuffs. You should have died, you old witch, she snarled. Now my children will grow up without parents because you couldn't mind your own business. Your children will grow up knowing their parents were murderers, I replied coldly. At least they'll have the truth. The FBI agent who interviewed me later explained that Jennifer had been involved with a criminal organization that specialized in insurance fraud and money laundering. They'd targeted David specifically because he was desperate and had wealthy parents. Your son was a victim too in a way, Agent Rodriguez told me. These people prey on desperation. They find someone with gambling debts or failed investments, then force them deeper and deeper into criminal activity. It didn't excuse what David had done, but it helped me understand how my sweet little boy had become a would-be murderer. Richard spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from his head injury. The doctors said if we'd been found even an hour later, he might not have survived. I spent 3 days having my wrist surgically repaired and getting stitches for various cuts and scrapes. But we were alive. Against all odds, we'd survived our son's attempt to murder us and escaped from professional killers. The trial made national news. Son tries to murder parents for insurance money. The prosecutors used my recording as key evidence, along with David's confession and testimony from FBI agents about Jennifer's criminal organization. David was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder and insurance fraud. Jennifer got life without parole for racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder. The 3 men with Jennifer were already wanted for multiple murders in other states. They'd never see freedom again. Our grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, came to live with us after their parents were imprisoned. It wasn't easy, explaining why Mommy and Daddy had gone away. But children are resilient. Grandpa, Tyler asked me one day, why did Daddy try to hurt you? Sometimes people make very bad choices when they're scared. I told him, but that doesn't mean we stop loving them. Because despite everything, I did still love David. The man who tried to kill me was still my son. I just had to love him from a distance now, behind prison walls and bulletproof glass. The important thing was that Richard and I had survived. We'd faced the ultimate betrayal and lived to tell the story. And we'd learned that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born with. 2 years have passed since that terrible night at Red Canyon Overlook. Richard and I are sitting on our back porch, watching Emma and Tyler play in the garden we've planted together. The roses are blooming again, just like they did before our world turned upside down. Richard recovered completely from his head injury, though he still has headaches on cloudy days. My wrist healed well, with only a slight ache when the weather changes. But the emotional scars took much longer to fade. For months after the trial, I couldn't sleep without seeing David's face when he pushed us off that cliff. The cold calculation in his eyes. The moment when our loving son became a stranger capable of murder. Richard had nightmares too. He'd wake up gasping, reliving the fall and the hours we spent hiding in the cave system, convinced we were going to die. But children have a way of healing broken hearts. Emma is 10 now, Tyler is 8. They've adapted to living with their grandparents with the resilience that only children possess. They know their parents are in prison, but they also know they're safe and loved. Grandma Margaret, Emma says, running up to me with dirt under her fingernails. The tomatoes are getting big. They'll be ready to pick soon. I tell her, smiling. We'll make salsa like I taught you. Tyler follows his sister, carrying a small watering can. Grandpa Richard says we can build a treehouse next month. If you keep up with your chores and homework, Richard confirms from his chair beside me. These ordinary moments are precious now. The simple pleasure of watching children play. The satisfaction of growing our own vegetables. The peace of knowing we're safe in our own home. But we learned hard lessons about trust and family. I visit David once a month at the state penitentiary. He's changed in prison. The desperate, dangerous man who tried to kill us has been replaced by someone quieter, more thoughtful. Someone who understands the weight of what he did. I dream about that night, he told me during our last visit. I see your face when I pushed you. The terror in your eyes. I'll carry that for the rest of my life. Good, I replied. You should carry it. It reminds you who you never want to be again. He's taking college courses in prison, working toward a degree in social services. He says he wants to help people when he gets out, instead of hurting them. I can't undo what I did, he said. But maybe I can prevent other people from making the same mistakes. I told him I was proud of him for trying to become a better person. Because despite everything, he's still my son. I can love him and still hold him accountable for his choices. Jennifer, on the other hand, shows no remorse. She refuses to see Emma and Tyler, claiming they're better off without her. Maybe she's right. The FBI agent Rodriguez told us that our case helped them break up a major insurance fraud ring. Jennifer's criminal organization had been responsible for at least 12 suspicious deaths over 5 years. Our survival and testimony saved other families from going through what we experienced. Your courage in recording that conversation and surviving that night led to justice for a lot of victims, Agent Rodriguez said. But it wasn't courage that saved us. It was stubbornness. Richard and I are both too stubborn to die on someone else's schedule. We've made our house more secure now. Better locks, security cameras, motion sensors. Not because we're paranoid, but because we learned that evil can come from the people you trust most. We've also updated our will and insurance policies. Everything is in an irrevocable trust that benefits Emma and Tyler. No one can pressure us to sign papers or make changes under duress. The children ask about their parents sometimes, but less often now. They're building new memories with us. Birthday parties and camping trips and bedtime stories. The normal life that David and Jennifer tried to steal from all of us. Do you ever hate Daddy? Emma asked me one day while we were baking cookies. No, sweetheart. I told her honestly. I hate what he did, but I don't hate him. He's sick in his heart. And sometimes people do terrible things when they're sick. Will he get better? Tyler wanted to know. I hope so, I said. But even if he does, he has to stay in prison because of the bad choices he made. The children accept this with the matter-of-fact way kids handle difficult truths. They know their father made mistakes that can't be undone. They also know they're loved and safe. Richard and I have become advocates for elder abuse prevention. We speak at community centers and senior groups about the warning signs of financial exploitation by family members. Trust but verify, I always tell audiences. Love your children, but don't sign papers without understanding them completely. We've learned that family betrayal is more common than people want to believe. Adult children stealing from elderly parents. Grandchildren pressuring grandparents to change wills. Spouses hiding debts and planning insurance fraud. But we've also learned that survival is possible. That you can rebuild trust after betrayal. That children can thrive even when their parents fail them completely. On quiet evenings like this one, watching Emma chase fireflies while Tyler helps Richard check the tomato plants, I feel something I didn't think I'd ever feel again after that night at the canyon. Peace. We survived the ultimate betrayal and came out stronger. We're raising two beautiful children who will grow up knowing the difference between right and wrong. We're helping other families protect themselves from the kind of predators who targeted us. Most importantly, we're still here. Still breathing. Still loving each other and the children who depend on us. David tried to push us off a cliff to silence us. Instead, he gave us a story that needed to be told. A warning that could save other families from experiencing the same betrayal. Sometimes the greatest victories come from simply refusing to give up. And sometimes the family you save is more important than the family you lose. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're watching this video, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have elderly parents or grandparents in your life, give them a call today. Let them know they're loved and valued for more than just their assets. Remember, family should be about love, not money. And if someone in your family is pressuring you about finances or legal documents, trust your instincts. Ask questions. Get independent advice. Your life might depend on it.